I think playing this deck might be classified as some kind of crime. But don't worry, I didn't hurt anyone. Like, literally, I didn't announce a single attack. No retreat lock, nothing. This 60 is for the true pacifists of the Pokemon TCG, who still want to win some games. The core concept of the deck is really simple. You stick an incredibly tanky Mega Kangaskhan in the active, and then every time your opponent hits it, you just heal it back to full HP. All while slowly disrupting and chipping away at their resources until eventually they can't attack and just deck out. But when you're playing online, that's actually not the only win condition. See, if you run out of time on TCG Live, even if you've still got cards in your deck, even if you're still in a winning position, you lose. And Gardevoir has some notoriously long animation times. Just take a look at this clip. Even though they're making 30 damage of progress every turn and should eventually win, this deck kinda breaks the game when you're playing on ladder. You do have a few other win conditions against Gardevoir though, and there are always a few techs that you can play if you really don't want to lose to that Psychic Menace. So let's run through every card in the 60, as well as discuss a few potential inclusions I've been considering after all the testing I've done. Also, shout out to Chandler Crane. They aren't the first person to come up with this deck, but they did recently win a big online tournament with it, and that's what really inspired me to reinvestigate the concept. For Pokemon, of course we've got some Mega Kangaskhan. This list has 3, but I think you could get away with 2. It's a perfect low to the ground draw engine, netting 2 extra cards every turn. 300 HP on a basic is by far the best rate that you can get, and the attack actually doesn't matter because we're never going to use it. The other benefit of Mega Kangaskhan is its colorless typing, which allows it to be buffed by our next Pokemon, Buffalant. We've got a maxed out count of 4 since we'll need to have 2 in play at all times to keep the Curly Wall ability online, reducing the damage our basic colorless Pokemon take by 60 every time our opponent attacks. And if our opponent ever KOs one, you'll need to immediately replace it unless you want to risk losing Kangaskhan. Because of this, there's also a Shaman included in the list with its Flower Curtain ability. This prevents all damage done to our benched Pokemon that don't have a rule box, primarily functioning as a tool to work around any bench sniping Pokemon that could otherwise continuously threaten the Buffalants. In particular, Screamtail would be an absolute nightmare to deal with without Shaman protecting our bench. Similarly, Psyduck is a necessity, not only to protect the benched Boofs, but also as a way to block massive bursts of damage onto Kangaskhan. Without its Damp ability completely shutting down Cursed Blast, a Dusknoir Dusclops Phantom Dive combo would be more than enough to break through the tank even after factoring in the minus 60 from Curly Wall. This duck is so vital to the core game plan against Dusknoir decks that I'm even considering adding in its evolution Golduck, purely for some added HP and immunity to Klefki's mischievous lock ability. That's actually it for the Pokemon, so next let's cover the 3 most important trainers in the deck: Wally, Penny, and Palpad. Of course, we've got 4 copies of each of them. Wally's Compassion fully heals any one of our Mega Pokemon at the completely irrelevant cost of returning all attached energy to hand. Well, we aren't planning on attacking, so that doesn't matter. Similarly, Penny picks up any of our basic Pokemon and all cards attached. Then we can just immediately re-bench them for a functional full heal. This has the added benefit of being able to work on all of our Pokemon, not just Mega Kangaskhan. But if you do choose to heal Kangaskhan, you'll need a way to get it back in the active. But this is easy, with either an air balloon and retreating something else, or if you have a second Kangaskhan already on the bench, you can just promote it after Penny. Obviously, having 8 ways to fully heal your tank is incredible. But how about the ability to double this number and add 8 more copies of these cards to your deck? That's exactly why we've got 4 Palpads in the list. Each of these items can shuffle any 2 supporters from your discard back into the deck. While this is often just a method of gaining access to more copies of Wally's Compassion and Penny, it can obviously also be used to recycle other supporters when required, and has the added benefit of increasing your overall deck size, helping to further ensure that your opponent is the one who decks out first. Now, before I get on with the rest of the list, I just wanted to bring up the fact that unlike most of my other videos, I didn't get a chance to try and win a tournament with this deck. Yet. I just haven't had the time between personally prepping for 3 back-to-back-to-back majors in New Zealand, Sydney, and London, and being way too busy getting all this merch ready for you fellas. Make sure you check it all out on TimDanklin.com. The 3 different playmats and hat are easily my personal favorites. But seriously, if you do want to see me run this at an actual tournament, make sure to let me know in the comments and show this video some love. If it does well enough, I'd be more than happy to head down to my locals heals and ruin a few fellas' days. Anyway, let's get on with the list. 4 Arven help act as our initial setup engine, however, it's not always the most useful card after those first couple turns. 2 0/6 Machinations drastically accelerate how quickly you can deck out your opponent. Without these, they'd just be able to simply build up a massive hand and then play Lily's Determination over and over again, eventually outlasting you. But now with 0/6, when they build up a massive hand, you can force them to discard the vast majority of it. There's also 2 Eerie as another way to rip cards from your opponent's hand. However, rather than making them discard all but their 3 most important cards, Eerie instead cherry picks 2 specific items and is crucial for our game plan into Goldengo. If you can run them out of superior energy retrievals quick enough, the game becomes extremely winnable. There's also 1 Iono, which has a few cool use cases. Obviously, it can disrupt our opponent's hand, setting them down to just a couple cards, potentially buying us a few turns to re-establish a perfect board state after losing a Pokemon. Additionally, it can prevent us from decking out when we've drawn cards too aggressively and are sitting on a massive hand with only a few cards left in deck. And it can even force our opponents to draw extra cards in some scenarios. For example, if they've just thinned out their hand or been forced to thanks to 0/6 Machinations, Iono can make them draw more cards than they previously had, functionally accelerating the deck out process. There are even situations where your opening hand has nothing else going on and it just acts as a draw 6. I think I'd kinda like a second Iono in the list. 1 Lana's Aid is here as a way to recover Bouffalance, Psyduck, or even Shaman if our opponent chooses to consistently target down any one of these support Pokemon. I don't love that this takes up our supporter for turn, and I think I might prefer something like a Night Stretcher or even Sacred Ash, but it does have its uses and 1 copy is pretty nice. There's 1 Ruffian, which can discard a tool and or special energy from one of our opponent's Pokemon. It's alright for removing key damage boosting tools like Maximum Belt, but I think I'd rather just play the Arven searchable item Tool Scrapper, and if I really cared about discarding special energy, I'd just play an Enhanced Hammer. The only real benefit with Ruffian is that you can recycle it using Pal Pad, but I just don't think that's necessary and worth taking up your supporter for turn. We've got 2 Boss's Orders and 2 Counter Catches, which can both be used to gust up and stall key liabilities, often forcing our opponents to burn energy in order to retreat them out of the active. Although Boss is a supporter and we're never actually taking a prize lead, there are a number of situations where you'd still like to be able to gust something up while prizes are tied at 6-6. And again, getting to recycle it with Pal Pad is incredibly valuable. However, I could definitely see shifting these counts around and potentially playing a few more Counter Catcher. Another card that really punishes your opponent's bench liabilities is Handheld Fan. We've got 3, but like Kangaskhan, I think you could get away with 2 since your active usually isn't going down. This is the key solution to a lot of matchups, and without it, there's almost nothing stopping our opponent from just attacking every single turn until you run out of healing cards, which will usually happen well before they deck out. However, if each time they attack your active, one of those energies gets sent to a useless benched Pokemon, you'll be putting them on a pretty tight clock. But for all these disruptive tech cards, I've been assuming that our opponent has some kind of useless liability that can't attack stuck on their bench. And there is no way anyone is going to be dumb enough to voluntarily bench one of these. Well, you might actually be wrong on that because there are some absolute characters playing on PokemonTCG Live. But in case they don't make that mistake, there is an easy solution. Accompanying Flute. It reveals the top 5 cards of our opponent's deck, and then you get to pick any number of basic Pokemon from there and bench them. There's only 2 in the initial 60, but I'd really recommend adding a few more just in case they whiff. You can also consider 1 Erica's Invitation as a way to bench Pokemon directly from their hand, and again, because it's a supporter, it means we can recycle it if required. Another massive reason to value all these supporters in our deck is the 4 copies of Pokegear 3.0. This crucial consistency item functionally lets us pick and choose which supporters we can have access to each turn, and it ensures that we'll never whiff a heal on Kangaskhan. Now, considering that we do generally need to play one of these healing supporters every single turn unless our opponent misses a beat, it can often be pretty difficult to weave in anything else without giving up a KO. That's where our A-Spec Scoop Up Cyclone comes into play. It's basically just penny on an item, but that is really key when you want to play something like 0/6 on the same turn while still healing healing Kangaskhan. It's also Arven searchable, which provides an additional 4 outs to a full heal when required. You can absolutely play around with a few other A-specs like Secret Box, Miracle Headset, and even Neutralization Zone to really surprise opponents, but I do think Scoop Up Cyclone is the overall best option. 2 Nest Balls are here to get our key Pokemon into play. I wouldn't hate including some more for added consistency, but Kangaskhan's ability to draw cards every turn, plus generally not being in a rush to fully set up, means that this is pretty manageable. Closing out our items, we've got 3 Crushing Hammers. I would like 4, but it's really hard to find the space, and even though it's only on a coin flip, hitting just 1 or 2 heads in a game can be devastating for our opponent's resources, especially when you combine this with the energy disruption of Handheld Fan or sniping Night Stretches with Eerie and then Lost Zoning Munkidori's Dark Energy. When it comes to stadiums, we've got 3 of the lively variety. I think you definitely need to include a fair few options to bump Watchtower and keep the draw engine online, but I'd absolutely be interested in exploring a few different disruptive stadiums like Pokemon League Headquarters or, when it comes out, the new Night Mine. But I'd still keep at least 1 lively stadium in there no matter what. As for tools, I've already talked about the incredible Handheld Fan, but the original list chose to include 1 Protective Goggles to combat Kangaskhan's fighting weakness. Personally, I think this is a pretty safe card to cut. If we run into Mega Lucario, whatever, just take the L. Even if you could survive some of the attacks, it's not like you have a Handheld Fan attached to disrupt them anyway. 2 Bravery Charm are nice for passing certain breakpoints as well as making our support Pokemon more difficult to deal with, but other than the Golden Go matchup, I often find myself favoring a Handheld Fan on the active instead. Lastly, we've got 1 Air Balloon. This is pretty critical for initially getting Kangaskhan into the active, as well as comboing it with Penny to simply pick up our active, promote a Bouffalon with Air Balloon, and then retreat for free back into the now fully healed Mega Kangaskhan. As for energy, we don't really need any, but a couple Mists do help protect against a few specific one-hit KO attacks like Roaring Moon's Frenzied Gouging and Absol's Terminal Period, as well as Alakazam's Powerful Hand, all of which would otherwise be almost completely unbeatable. I do think it would be pretty funny to include a 3rd Mist Energy just to have the rare option to attack, but obviously it goes against the whole idea of a Pacifist deck and is completely unnecessary. Well, I've already talked about most of the changes that I'd want to make, but the biggest one is definitely the inclusion of a couple more accompanying flutes. They are just so important for increasing the value of Handheld Fan in every matchup, as well as allowing you to quickly clog Gardevoir's bench, giving you a legitimate win condition. There are a few other cards that I haven't mentioned yet though, and number 1 on that list is Redeemable Ticket. Count your prize cards, shuffle them, put them to the bottom of your deck, then take that many prize cards from the top of your deck and put them face down as your new prize cards. This is perfect since we're never actually taking any prize cards. So if they're less than ideal, having a way to access them can be really helpful. And it would also mean that you can possibly cut down on a few of the other counts. Lily's Determination could be interesting as a way to not only boost our consistency, but also act as a one-sided shuffle draw supporter that can be recycled to prevent deck out in the endgame. However, I think Xerosic's Machinations kinda solves this problem anyway. Lastly is the Fermented Juice Shuckle. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon has any grass energy attached, you may use this ability to heal 30 from any one of your Pokemon. It does kind of suck that you'd have to include a grass energy as well, but it can be an excellent counter to any deck that spreads damage across multiple targets, particularly Munkidori, you know, the guy that is in literally every deck. Overall, I think there's still a fair bit of work that can be done on this 60, but it's just such a unique concept, I cannot wait to see people explore it further. And I think the most important thing that I've learned from all of this testing on ladder is that even if a matchup seems like it should be impossible, like Raging Bolt, some people just really don't know what to do when faced with such a weird deck. I'll be honest, you will get way more wins than you deserve when you play this deck. So yeah, if you want to see me take this to a tournament and try and win without announcing a single attack, make sure that you show this video some love. And don't forget to check out all the fresh new merch over on TimDanklin.com. Trust me, it's some good stuff. Cheers, fellas.